Hello, everybody. Welcome to that word chat. If I seem vibrant and energetic, I'm really not. Well, let me turn on my video. I had my shot yesterday, my vaccine, my number one, and it was the Pfizer, and it wiped me out. Some people say, it's no big deal. It doesn't do anything for me. It kind of wore me out. So I had a lot of sleep, and I'm not quite sure if I'm fully energetic. So I told Iva before we started, she may just have to carry the show because I'm not, I may just sort of zone out here. But I'm excited. Iva Cheung. We've been in the same room together. We've never actually had a conversation together, I don't think, except on Twitter. We've had lots of conversations on Twitter. So I feel she's like a good friend who I haven't really spent nearly enough time with. She's a editor in Canada, Vancouver, I believe in the city of Vancouver. We'll ask her. She's a certified professional editor with Editors Canada. She has won all the Canadian editor awards there are, I guess. We're going to ask her about those. She's focused on plain language. She's just finished her PhD. And you probably are very aware of her from her the comics she writes and posts on Twitter that always seem to really resonate. So, Iva, how are you?
Hi, everyone. I find it rather implausible that so many people voluntarily signed up to hear me blather on about random bullshit for an hour, but welcome. I hope this isn't a wasted hour for you. And
It,
happy
it
you're all here. I see so many familiar faces, folks that I would have seen at conferences, and I miss you all.
we definitely had a lot of Canadian internet addresses turning up for this. So you definitely brought the Canadian contingent. We had James Harbeck, and he didn't bring this many Canadians in. I'm not sure why that is, but maybe we'll get him on and ask him what's going on there. But anyways, great to see you. And we're going to try something a little bit different. It's a little slightly different. We've shared screen before. I've got some comics that Iva has created, and I'm going to share my screen let me see. Did I set this up right? I don't remember. Share screen, and we're going to look at them together.
Oh man, that's like watching a sausage get made. I don't know how funny they're going to be if we dissect them frame by frame. But yeah, sure. Let's go
they're
for
they're
it.
going to be they're going to be amazing. Not frame by frame, but so do you see the? You should see a blank screen. Am I doing the? Did I hit play?
Yeah.
Okay. So it should be a blank, totally blank screen, which is, I assume, how you start. This is one that I like. This is a recent one that I think this came out, or I noticed it around National Grammar Day on March 4th. And I thought it was fitting because National Grammar Day is a day we kind of celebrate, have a fun time celebrating the editorial process, grammar, the writing process, but it's sort of a cringeworthy day because so many people kind of take that day to talk about their pet peeves and how people are imbeciles if they don't do things right. So anyway, I'm going to let you read this along at home, and I'm going to we'll go. This is the first two panels, and then this is the next two panels, and I take it this is always Iva sitting at the. Is this true? Is it self? Are you drawing yourself in these situations?
In most cases, I suppose I can be a proxy for the
Yeah.
character.
Okay. And the final two frames. Oh no, there's a couple more. The grammar peeves take over, and then the curly-haired friend comes in and to rescue you from this.
It's a
All
very
right.
trusted character, the curly-haired editor.
So what's so where do you are you drawing these with a pen?
I've gone completely digital now.
Yeah.
I treated myself to an iPad earlier last
Oh,
year.
nice. Uh-huh.
And then I was trying to learn the tools, trying to figure out how to do everything in Procreate. And so paper isn't part of it anymore. But up
Oh, very
until
cool.
last year, yeah, I was drawing everything on paper and scanning it in and cleaning it up. And
Uh-huh.
yeah,
So when did you start drawing cartoons? The earliest one I saw I think was I want to say 2013.
yeah, that's
Is that
exactly
right?
when I started. It was in
Yeah.
January of 2013.
Okay.
And
All right.
back then, I had been freelancing for about a year, and
Mm-hmm.
I wrote more than I drew. At that point, I was blogging pretty much every week. I'd left an in-house position, in late 2011, and then
Mm-hmm.
through that first year, I was blogging every week, trying to get some content up about just comparing what it's like to be an in-house editor versus a freelance editor. Things that I think that people who work with freelance editors should know, and people who work in house and what they should know, and just topics that interested me. So I did a post about styles in editing styles in maps and whatnot. And so I was writing quite a bit. I would go to Editors Canada or Editors BC presentations and blog about some of the presentations or online workshops that I attended. And the cartoon really started almost as a kind of a break, in that every 3 weeks I would be writing, and then once every month I would put out cartoon. That was a little bit easier
Mm-hmm.
to digest. That didn't take as much research or time for me to put together. And yeah, I've been trying to do one every month ever since.
Yeah, and I think you started out immediately doing one per month, at least from what I could tell looking through the archives. The
Mm-hmm.
first one was about was called Memento, right? It was about getting a I can't remember what it was said. It was getting a tattoo across your chest or your character's chest, and it what was the do you remember what the tattoo was?
It's never just a light copy edit.
Oh yeah, it's never just a light copy edit. These are all just. I mean, you have. I guess it feels like one thing is that when we all get together, we talk about how nice it is that people relate to us and we can speak the same language. And when I read every single cartoon, it's like totally relatable. It's like, oh yes, tell me about it. So let's do another one. And apologize for the little bit of slowness as I suppose there's probably a clever way to share screen quickly, um, but I don't know what it is. All right, here's one. Here's one we can put all on one screen, so you can look at that. Oh, you know what we should do? What if that's you? Let's do this together. I'll be the wise guy on the mountain. You read your part.
You are the wise guy on the mountain, Mark. Everybody looks up to you for wisdom.
I,
I've traveled a
I
long distance to seek your wisdom.
Bethesda, Maryland.
Uh, I'm sorry,
Reference 62 in your manuscript. Publisher's location, Bethesda, Maryland.
but
You're welcome. How do we do? Good? All right, let's do one more. And this is one thing I really want to talk about is plain language.
hmm,
This is recent, right? This is a few
yeah,
months
this is
ago.
past year.
All right, so let's talk about. I love that one. Let's talk about plain language a little bit. Um, that's your that's been something you've presented on and written blog posts about. And incidentally, your blog posts, I mean, now I think you've fallen off the writing blogs, and it's a lot of cartoons, which we love. But you were very prolific starting out years ago doing those blogs, and it's such cool and interesting stuff. And I don't think I've gone back and read many of it, but I, and sort of getting ready for the show, I looked back at the beginning. I said, there's some really good stuff out there, back there. So, so I encourage everybody to, I mean, that's the thing with blogs. We tend to, look at things that are fresh and current, but there's such good, rich content going back years. So, have a good look at that. And honestly, I struggle a little bit with plain language is sort of obvious in what it, by definition, it's language that's plain, that's accessible, but it's also, there's a legal view, and there's it probably means something a little bit different in Canada than it does in the United States. The US has a plain language law. Can you give us plain language in a nutshell?
Sure. I'm actually going to fall back on the definition that the International Plain Language Federation agreed to. And it's that a document is in plain language if its intended audience can easily find what they need, understand what they find, and use what they find to meet their needs. So there are several layers to that definition, and it's the one that's accepted by most plain language organizations around the world. And it's the one that we use while we're developing plain language standards, for instance. And we were having, I think I was following a Twitter discussion about the whole term plain language and how in itself, ironically, it's not very plain and it's not very obvious what it actually means. As you say, some people have their own view about what plain language means, and there are many misconceptions tied to it. But there is an official definition, and the one that I stated is the official one that we're going with now. There was some effort to sort of rebrand it and call it clear communication or clear design, information design. But at this point, plain language is what we're going with. We have a definition attached to it, so we're rolling with it until the community collectively decides to use something else. But the point is that it's not just about language, it's about holistic communication, how to effectively communicate to your audience, know where to find them, communicate in a way that is acceptable to them and that is accessible to them.
Right. And there's and going back to one of those old blog posts, there's something you said that I wanted to share. You called plain language, to you said it's an overtly political act meant to redress power imbalances. So what does that mean?
Yeah, so I was drawn to plain language not just because it's a really useful way of thinking about communicating, but I was drawn to it because of its social justice implications. So basically, if you are a member of a democracy, you cannot meaningfully participate in that democracy unless you understand the legislation that your government is putting out. You cannot meaningfully be part of a contract or enter into a contract unless there is a meeting of the minds, right? Unless both parties understand what you're agreeing to. My background in the last few years has been in health and health research, and a fundamental tenet of health research and in healthcare is informed consent. This concept that you have to be able to consent to something that's happening to you medically, or if you enter into health research, you really have to know what you're getting yourself into and be informed. And you can't truly be informed if you're reading a consent form and you don't understand what it means. So plain language, a way of communicating this information to your intended audience, is essential to kind of leveling that playing field, because if you have very complex language, for instance, legal language or medical language that only a subset of the population really understands, then you're creating all sorts of barriers to people. You're setting up hierarchies. One of the easiest ways to make somebody feel small is to use terminology that you know they don't understand. So I see plain language as a way of redressing those power imbalances and those inequities.
Yeah, and I think of it as sort of a legal thing, a legislative thing, where the laws, people should be able to read the laws without trying to figure out what's going on. But I could see in medical, in the medical field, it's got to be a huge thing where people, I mean, there's a separate language for medicine, and we need people to understand what the different vaccines are, what's the differences, and what you're supposed to do to once you get your vaccine, and how do you get it, and things like that. So that's your so what's your PhD in?
My
Congratulations on your PhD.
Oh, thank you.
A year or two ago, last year?
2019. Yeah, I finished in 2019. Yeah, I was. So just to kind of take a step back, I was really interested in this sort of political social justice angle of plain language, and I knew I wanted to study it a little bit more. And at that point, I was out of school for about 9 years and wanted to find an academic home. I was willing to, I knew that I wanted to study plain language from an equity, through an equity lens. And I was really willing to kind of go anywhere. Stay in my home city because I've got roots here now, but to kind of work with any department. So I approached people in linguistics, I approached people in English and in education, and nobody was interested or had the capacity to take me on as a grad student. And, I can understand that. I was out of school for a long time. I didn't have a background in English necessarily, or in education. So I struggled for a while to find a home to study this. But one of my friends, she worked at the University of Victoria and asked me, have you ever heard of knowledge translation or mobilization? And at that point I hadn't. And in Canada, that's sort of what we call taking research knowledge and being able to get that knowledge to people who will actually use the knowledge. In the United States, that science is kind of called implementation science. So you'll hear different terminology in different places. But in Canada, we call it knowledge translation and knowledge mobilization. And when I looked into a little bit more, this was primarily in health. So in health, we call it knowledge translation. And I was really interested in it because not only could I look at the issue of health communication from an equity perspective, but whatever I created could be very practical and have immediate application. And I thought it was a really great fit. And I started sending some emails to faculty, to the universities here in Metro Vancouver. And the one person who agreed to sit down with me and talk with me about my research ideas was the person who eventually became my PhD supervisor. And that's how I ended up in health. And because he was in mental health, that was the focus that I'd taken afterward.
Because your undergraduate degree and you have a master's degree and a bachelor's degree in physics and in science.
I did, yeah. I had a couple of degrees in physics.
Yeah, physics, and also you had a master's in publishing, right? And now a PhD. And you're done with school for a while.
I am. I am done with school. Yeah.
So that's it's interesting. So your interest wasn't necessarily mental health, but it was in making those connections. And so what was can you describe your research for your PhD?
Sure. It ended up actually being a great fit because in mental health, I looked at rights documents that we give to people who are involuntarily hospitalized under the Mental Health Act here in British Columbia. So this is the law that allows hospitals to detain people, so to keep them in hospital against their will because of the mental disorder. And as you can imagine, that's a legal issue, right? Because you're detained against your will. You're detained against your will is redundant, but you're detained in hospital. And that's a legal issue. You still have your charter rights, but it's also a health issue because it deals with obviously your mental health. And so it was like a confluence of complex legal language and complex medical language, all for an audience of people who are experiencing a mental health crisis, right? So if there's any opportunity to use plain language, that would be it. And so the province, the Mental Health Act requires that when somebody is detained under the Mental Health Act, they're supposed to be read their rights, told what their rights are by a member of the staff. And they use this document that's called Form 13. It's very bureaucratic looking, and the language is very legal and bureaucratic. And a nurse or a social worker is supposed to read this information to somebody experiencing a mental health crisis. And it had never been user tested. So that's one of the first things that I did, was I recruited people who had experienced involuntary hospitalization under the Mental Health Act, brought them in, and basically gave them the form. I read it to them as if I were the nurse reading it to them, and asked them to do a think aloud testing session. So just to kind of read through it and tell me, you know, in real time, how they were reacting to it and what they thought about it. So they would identify, you know, problematic sentences that didn't make sense to them, passages that were really confusing, or, you know, what was most illuminating about this process were passages that made them feel small or powerless. And that's what was really most gratifying about this work, was that we took into account not just how clear the information was, but how it made people feel in that moment of extreme vulnerability. So once we got that user testing done, we tested it with, I think, 18 people who had experienced involuntary hospitalization, identified some of the major problems with it. In those user testing sessions, I also showed them some alternatives. So I showed them a video that came out of the UK. I showed them some other pamphlets and other materials that came out of different provinces, and asked them, again, what do you like about this and what do you not like about this? And use that to compile a list of changes to this rights document that would make it not only easier to understand and easier to read, but more acceptable and more comforting. And then the second phase of my research involved a patient-oriented research team, which means that instead of being participants in the research study, we invited patients to actually be part of the research group. And they helped us co-create a brand new set of materials, of rights notification materials, that could be used to supplement this very bureaucratic Form 13 that the government had been using for 20 years. And so we developed this suite of tools that included a pamphlet and a rights card, a sort of small wallet-sized rights card, a couple of posters, and a video that staff could just show people if they didn't feel like taking in information from a staff member. And, you know, in that situation, if a staff member is responsible for detaining you, you might not trust what they have to say. But if you watch a video, then that seems to be coming from a more objective source. And it's a little bit more acceptable to some people. And further, with a video, you can watch it multiple times. You can slow it down if you need to. You can turn on captions. And it just made that information a little bit more acceptable. And we worked with a videographer to create, you know, all sorts of animated features, and made it available for people to use. And once we finished the drafts of the suite of tools, we user tested them again, because you can't call something plain language until your intended audience tells you that it is in plain language. And that's the most important part of plain language, is that it is outcomes based. Just because you have followed every item on a plain language checklist, it does not mean that your final document is in plain language. You have to test it. So we tested it again with another group of people who had experienced involuntary hospitalization. Overwhelmingly found that they preferred our materials over the old form, and based on their feedback, made some tweaks, and then finally published these materials and made them available for our health authorities to use. So that was the extent of what made it into my dissertation. We also took these materials to actual hospitals and health authorities and created training sessions to tell staff why it's important to give people rights information. What the researchers told us is that when somebody's feeling very powerless and in that situation where they're being detained and they're being held against their will, one way of making them feel less coerced is to increase their feeling of procedural justice and procedural fairness. So an important way to do that is to give them information about their rights so that they know why they're being held in the hospital, what they can do about it. They can challenge it, they can apply for review panel hearings, they can challenge their detention in court, but to know that they have been judged on a set of fair criteria, and that if they disagree with it, there are steps that they can take. And having that knowledge, even if they don't act on it, is empowering and is actually a critical part of their recovery.
That's probably the coolest PhD research thing I've ever heard. You must be so proud. I am so proud to know you. It's just so cool, and it's taking. I mean, what we do as editors is we try to make things a little bit more understandable, and we can take pride in the fact that we've helped somebody get their idea across, and we've helped somebody understand something. But you're doing this on a kind of this wonderful scale. How's it been received? Have you made inroads with in British Columbia and the way things are, the way this is done?
A little bit. I'm really proud of the work that our team has done. We have managed to get these materials in officially to 2 of the 5 health authorities, so they're formally using them with their patients. We're still working on the other ones, and in the meantime, there's the research that came out of this project is helping to inform some of the policies that's coming out. Fortunately, we have this amazing policy window that came about because the provincial ombudsperson issued a report in 2019 about how people's rights were being violated and about steps that the province had to take to address these rights violations. And it just came at the perfect time and allowed us to take this research and apply it and try to persuade the government to move in a direction that's more rights-based. It's government, so it's going to move relatively slowly. But I'm proud of the work that our team was able to do, and without the patients being actual members of our research team, and without having a clinical nurse educator actually being a member of our team, we definitely wouldn't have gotten as far as we have. The reason it was adopted by one of the health authorities is because the nurse championed it at her own health authority and linked us to the right people to get these training sessions done. So, yeah.
I think we have a question along these lines, at least one.
We do, yes. Patty, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, Iva. You answered some of my question, but I was just wondering why do you think that the original material for patients was so bad? Was it just for legal concerns, or also was it like, depending on race, is it racism or bias against people who have mental health problems? So anyway, it's just why was it so bad originally?
That's a multifaceted question. Yeah, it was. There are so many reasons. First of all, it was written by a couple of bureaucrats, and it was not user tested, and that's the big thing. I think back when it was written, and still today, we still have a very paternalistic view of mental health law, especially involuntary hospitalization, right? There is this conception that this idea that the medical professionals know best, especially when somebody's having a mental health crisis, they're not of sound mind, they can't make decisions for themselves. Let's allow the doctors to make decisions on their behalf. So there is certainly that paternalism that's infused into this document. I mean, yeah, the problem is that they didn't incorporate the patient perspective when designing these documents. And that goes for so many government documents generally, right? I think it's slowly getting better in some sectors, but certainly in this one, a lot of the time, when I did my first set of user testing, the participants said that this seems like a cover your ass document, right? It's a document that we ask the nurses and social workers to read this document to the patient and then ask them to sign it, acknowledging that they've read it to the patient, and then it goes into the file and is never seen again. So the purpose of that document was not necessarily to give people information that they needed. It was more to show that they've done, made some attempt at giving that information. And I think that's a big distinction. In fact, one of the revelations that came out of the first set of user testing of that document was that there is a line on the bottom of the form that says patient signature. And that's all it says. It doesn't say, sign here to acknowledge that you have heard these rights. It just says patient signature. So what I heard from my participants was that I'm not going to sign something. I don't know what it is. It says rights on the document. It feels like I'm signing my rights away. It feels like I'm entering into an agreement that I don't entirely understand. So a lot of people will just refuse to sign, right? And so this came about because they didn't consider their audience or didn't prioritize their audience. And again, because of the paternalism, this concept that people actually recover more effectively if they are given some sense of power and agency over the recovery is, it's relatively, I don't want to say relatively new. Some people have been trying to push it for a while, but it's only sort of gained, mainstream attention in the last decade or so. The idea of patient-centered care, the idea that people receiving care should have a say in how that care is delivered to them. I don't know if that answers your question. That was very long.
We did have another question from the room about which of the two health authorities are using the content from your PhD project?
Is this somebody who is in British Columbia? Because if you're not in British Columbia, that might not make sense. My answer might not make sense. So we have 5 main health authorities. We have the Vancouver Coastal Health Authority, the Fraser Health Authority, Vancouver Island Health Authority, Interior Health, and Northern Health. And the 2 big ones are Fraser and Vancouver Coastal. Vancouver Coastal has adopted them, as has Vancouver Island. So those are the 2 health authorities that have adopted them. I don't know if that means anything to you if you're not from BC.
Yeah. Well, and we had another question, and it doesn't mean much to me living in Ohio, but although I've been to Vancouver and I've been to Vancouver Island, very beautiful area, I have not had to avail myself of the health authorities there. Somebody else asked, is this applicable, or could it be applicable across provinces beyond British Columbia?
No, each province, because health is a provincial jurisdiction, each province has its own mental health act. So each province has its own mental health rights, and there's some overlap, but there's also some drastic differences between mental health acts across Canada.
Mhm. So, and this is something I'm really a little bit ignorant on, but I know that there are plain language laws. So if, does that help to say, this is, it's not just, we think this is better for you to say it this way. This is the law, you have to follow this.
Mhm. Yeah, the United States is the Plain Writing Act and that was Barack Obama who passed it in 2010, I believe. And in Canada, we don't have a federal plain language law. We do have the Accessible Canada Act, and the Accessible Canada Act, the government is starting to develop plain language standards for the Accessible Canada Act, but that applies only to federal government communications. So once these standards are created, if they're adopted as regulations by the various departments in the government, then that means everything that the government department creates that's public facing must adhere to some of these plain language standards. But it wouldn't be a requirement for all businesses, for instance, or even provincial communications. Each jurisdiction would have to develop its own rules around that. And that's true, I think, for the United States as well. The Plain Writing Act refers to public facing materials created by the federal government, and the states might have different policies.
Right. Yeah, I've been very curious to see I'd be curious, just people in the room, if the plain writing law has had any practical effect on their own work, because I can remember one time somebody, and I don't remember who now, asked me about that specifically, about my work in the plain writing law, and what do I know about plain writing. I can't remember who it was. But that's the only time, and it's not something you hear about. So I don't know, maybe people who work with the federal government, maybe there's more of an emphasis on it, but I do get the impression that maybe it's sort of a law that was passed, and now we're wondering, all right, what do we do with that? Do we really have to do anything? Is there any teeth to it, or is it just a thing? But I suppose any more awareness of that as an issue is a good thing, right? Let's go back to do a couple more cartoons. I asked some people in our Slack group for some of their favorites. So we have an emphasis on the more recent ones, but let's see what else we have. And this one, this is a fun one. This is an animated one. And it should, oh, darn it, it's not, oh, wait a second. There's a little play button. There we go. Okay, yay. Show it twice, because you got to see this, more than once. That's a nice little thing on the step walk. People are suggesting I sing along. I don't think I'll do that. That was Heather, our producer, and Tanya Gold, who sort of popularized this idea of the stat walk, and I think there was and the idea of the stat walk, for those of you who don't know, is stat means let it alone, don't worry about it, I like it that way. Stat walk is this idea that we need our mental break and to get out and just get some fresh air, take our eyes off the computer, and get away from the editing process a little bit. Let's do another one here.
Yeah, funny story. That took me 14 hours.
No.
Because
I
had never done any animation before, and I was doing everything the most inefficient way possible. I'm sure of it, because I was trying to use Adobe Illustrator, and And yeah, so I was trying to look at tutorials to figure out how to make the walk cycle. And it wasn't until last year when I worked with an actual professional animator that I found out that the walk cycle is actually one of the most time-consuming things to animate. And this was my first attempt at trying to create something. So it was so inefficient, and I was determined to get it done, but I was also cursing the entire time. I think I have a tweet string about working on something without knowing anything about how it was actually supposed to be made, how somebody would actually do this efficiently.
So have you applied that knowledge though to anything else? I haven't seen any other animated things.
No, not really. I mean, the only other thing that I animated would be the Pubesversary celebration gift that I share every July.
What? I don't remember this. I haven't seen this. Is it? And you wrote about the on Strong Language. You wrote about pubes or pubis or pubies, which Brian Garner tells us the correct pronunciation is pubies, which sounds very cute. So I'm sorry, Pubesversary. I suppose Heather will find us a link and put in the chat for us. We can, yeah.
It was a team effort. Several of us contributed to righting that wrong. Basically, yes, Brian Garner did say that the only pronunciation that was offered in, I think it was Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, was pubies. And and when I tweeted about that, everybody responded, I've never heard that. I never say pubies. It's pubes. That's how we say that word. And so we basically had this mini campaign to get the dictionary to write that wrong. And I wrote about it on Strong Language, and I think it happened in mid-July, July 13th, I believe. And I have it in my calendar now, every year on the anniversary of that glorious day where the dictionary capitulated to an angry Twitter mob. I celebrate Pubesversary with my editing pals.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I'm sorry I missed that, but we'll
this year.
Mm-hmm.
July 13th,
June?
2021.
July
I think
13th.
It's July. I believe so. I can quickly look it up.
All right. Well, we will all watch when it comes. And yeah, and speaking of, let's jump ahead here. We've got this was a favorite, the body count.
That was James Harbuck. So thank you, James, for suggesting that title there.
Oh yeah. Very nice. And that is, and I love I want to, zoom in on that final frame, because this is the ratio there. I think is about right. I catch pubic for public a couple of times a year probably, and of course whenever it happens, I step back from my computer, I tweet about it, I go get a drink, it's like, and then asses for assess and assets probably. I don't know about shift for shift. I think I've seen that before. Penile for penal, probably never. I don't know, maybe. So I think the ratios you've got for the little hash marks are probably correct there. Let's see. Let's do. Oh yeah, this is. Someone suggested this is a favorite. Very nice. And you suggested a couple. You said they were, and I didn't put them on here because they were just they were so complicated.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's okay. We'll put them in we'll put a link in. People can go look at them. One was APA, which is really APA 6th, right? This is before APA 7th came out.
Yeah.
What do you normally edit in?
When I was in book publishing, it was all Chicago, and then when I started freelancing, just a mix of everything.
So you've got this background in science. Do you do a lot of science editing, or what's your main client these days?
Not necessarily science editing. I mean, I still love working on books. They're not the most lucrative projects, as those of you who work in book publishing know. So I will work on the odd trade book to feed my soul, and then other work on top of that. I also really love indexing cookbooks. That's
right.
It's a fun distraction from the heavier stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And was your dissertation, was that APA?
No, it was not. No.
Oh.
I'm trying to remember. It was definitely not APA.
Yeah. Okay. People, I've seen this question. I try not to look at the chat too much and advise you not to look at the chat at all because it's so wonderfully distracting. But people are asking for your guinea pigs. I don't suppose you've got them on your lap, like people have
I do
cats
not
on
have
their
them
lap.
on my lap. I'm going to see if they're amenable to being
All right.
picked up. Sometimes they aren't. So I'm just going to...
No, we don't want you scratched. And if you go to Iva's Twitter feed and just look at the images, there are many videos of her guinea pigs. So if you need your guinea pig fix, it's there. Oh, hello.
This is Coco.
Yes.
She just turned 4. We had a birthday party for her.
And you've got 2, Coco and
Coconut. Coconut appears to be very relaxed and sleeping in one of our hides, so I'm going to leave her alone.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, and you have this affinity for, obviously, as your pet, you've got this affinity for guinea pigs, and then you also have an affinity for other little tiny animals, the tardigrade. Is that how you pronounce it? Tardigrade? I don't know if I've ever heard it.
Yeah.
And this is an image that you made, which also by the tweets I think probably took you a long time to create. You were complaining about it.
Sorry, I just went to put Coco back. I'll be back on screen shortly. So I was procrastinating, as I want to do, and people started making suggestions for what I should draw during my procrastination. That's sort of my creative outlet. And several people, Steve Klein-Edler suggested the tardigrade, and then people started adding onto it a festive tardigrade. Yes, perhaps a festive tardigrade with a party hat or holding a slice of cake. And so I tried to indulge as many people as I could and created this, whatever this is. This is.
So, is the tardigrade something you have a particular affinity for, or is that
so cute.
Steve Klein-Edler? We can, in a way. I mean, some people, they're so tiny little monsters that you can't crush or kill.
Yeah, they're amazing. They can survive the vacuum of space. They are really resilient, interesting creatures, and
they look great in a party hat.
There's a YouTube channel that I like called Journey to the Microcosmos. It's hosted by Hank Green, and there's several episodes now, but one of the good ones is their first episode on the tardigrade, and kind of addressing some of the misconceptions about how very immortal they are. They aren't quite immortal, but there's also, some other information about tardigrades that's just fun to know. They're amazing little animals.
Well, here's another one that was a favorite, which I think people can relate to. I think as editor, at least is my experience as an editor, I mean I make dumb mistakes. People see the emails I send out about I had a typo in half the emails I sent today reminding people of the show, and then I noticed it and fixed it for the second one. So just a minor thing. I think I did.
It just goes to show that editors need editors.
Yes, absolutely. Let's do. I think it's just one more cartoon or two more, so we'll get through those quickly because we're running out of time a little bit. Oh yeah, this is a recent one. I think Patty Boyd suggested this was her favorite, and I, like I say, I look at this and I say, yeah, I know, I feel the same way. Do this all the time.
That's
some
the
people
intent.
Some people I think are smart and they just put a query in and say, please check this quote. But others of us feel like, no, I have to know. So I do want to share a couple more images. These aren't cartoons, but
oh dear.
Yeah.
What are they?
Well, this is a cat. Whose cat is this? This is.
That's Jessica Cole's cat.
So you do the figures, of course, are Ivan's stick figure. You pointed out with the T-shirt one that we saw earlier. You said this is a rare cartoon where I'm actually wearing clothing. And of course you have I loved that there was one with a plain language machine that you're pressing a button, but you didn't draw the finger. You just had the ball hand pressing the button. It's very basic, but you have some. So have you been doing art? Is this a thing or?
Oh gosh, no. So when I first started this cartoon, actually, again, it was meant to be a relaxing diversion to my otherwise text-heavy blog posts. Once a month, you'd get a break and get a cartoon. But so I'd have these ideas of relatable scenarios that I wanted to depict. But at that point, I could not draw. I grew up not being able to draw at all. My parents put me in art classes. They did absolutely no good for me. They destroyed my confidence in being able to draw anything. And so I think I started in January of 2013. That previous Christmas, I was visiting my parents back when they still lived in Edmonton. They're here in Metro Vancouver now, but back then I was visiting them, and over Christmas I sort of binged on a bunch of XKCD cartoons, and realized that Randall Munroe is somebody who can convey so much information and emotion just through stick figures, and if that's possible for me to do too. The point of my cartoons was not the artistic merit; it was trying to get this relatable concept across. And so that's what I started doing. And at first, my process was actually incredibly slow, and I would use Adobe Illustrator and try to manipulate the figures in Adobe Illustrator to have the pose that I wanted, that I was sort of envisioning. And then I would print it out and trace it. That was how little confidence I had. But as I did that, I came to kind of recognize that as a really legitimate way of creating art. It's just another assistive technology. And if it allows you to express yourself, then, that's a perfectly good way of getting your message out there. But yeah, around 2019, when again, I was procrastinating on writing my dissertation, I started watching art videos on YouTube and saw that a lot of what goes into drawing there, it's not really innate talent that's the most important. It's knowing the techniques to use. And so I just started practicing the techniques, and I'm using editors and linguists and other animals as references to sort of try to practice those techniques.
So this is Ben Dreyer's dog, is that right?
Yeah, Sally.
Did I get that right? Okay. All get back to you. I thought as we were watching that, it was like, we had the image of the dog and you talking, and it was like a little bit of a talking dog. So it's good to be back to your face now. And I suppose I don't. Am I inferring too much to say that? Did your artistic, did the drawing play a role when you did the videos for the plain language thing? I mean, because you talked in the beginning about plain language is not simply about the words and editing the words, it's the whole message, and you chose a video to convey a message.
Yeah, and choosing the correct medium is just as important as the content that you're putting in that medium, right? If you're trying to tell your 80-year-old grandparents that they're eligible for the COVID vaccine, you're not going to rely exclusively on social media. So that's all part of the plain language process, is understanding where people are going and to find their information. And really the only way to figure that out is to ask them.
Okay.
Again, involving people in the creation process and to do user testing as needed.
Yeah. And I before we get, we're running low on time. I do want to make sure, I think we had one or two questions in the room, so I want to make sure we get to see if anybody has a question to ask. I'm not watching because I had the screen up showing the pictures and the cartoons.
We had one from Brienne about the comics. Brienne, if you wanted to unmute and ask.
Sure. Hi, Ev. It's lovely to see your face. I was just going to ask, when you started making the comic, did you have like a backlog of ideas, or did you just have one and you're like, I hope I have another one at some point? I had a webcomic for a while, and I was like, man, I've got 4 good ideas. I should do this for and I did. But it didn't, I didn't know after those 4 weeks if another idea would ever come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I started off with maybe 4 or 5, and then as I progressed, when you work, ideas come to you because you encounter one absurd situation after another, or one absurd interaction with authors or clients or whatever that other editors would relate to, and I keep worrying that one day I will run out of ideas. And sometimes, let's face it, there have been some months where I've kind of had to not necessarily phone it in, but where the ideas just weren't as developed as maybe they should have been. But this is once a month, and I'm hoping that I can sort of keep it going for a while. I know Crystal Watanabe, who does the Simple Markup comics, those are once a week. So she has to come up with ideas once a week, far more frequently than I do. Yeah, so I guess that sort of answers your question. I did have a few ideas at the very beginning, and then now I don't really have that much of a backlog. It's more, okay, what's happened this month that I should riff about.
You ever thought about putting them together in another form, a book form of?
Yeah, I've been asked that. I think just because of the way they're laid out, that might be difficult. As you said, the ones that I sent you on APA style and the passive voice one about the zombies,
right.
Those are big and long and complex,
right.
and they're just not really conducive to a uniform format. Another thing that Crystal Watanabe did better than I did, her comics are always the same size and format, and that would lend itself better to publishing. And yeah, I don't know. In some of the older comics, I think I'm a little embarrassed about, and I don't necessarily know that they would stand the test of time if I put them in a book, but
Sure. Well, maybe we'll see. I mean, but there are a lot of great. I mean, just going back through you have one at least once a month since 2013, I think, right? So it's easy to go back through the archives on your website and get a sense of all of them, and it's a pleasure to do that. You have won, we said this in a tweet, you've won like every award that Editors Canada has, I think. I don't know, maybe that's not true, but what are all these awards you've been given?
Oh gosh.
Or you've earned, I should say.
So there was the Tom Fairley Award for Editorial Excellence that's given every year to somebody who's nominated based on usually a single project. And the nominators would send in, the before and after of the edited manuscript or whatever it is, along with recommendation letters or letters from the author or translator or what have you. And I won that award for work that I did on a book called Cow, which was translated from the German. It's a book by Florian Werner and translated by Doris Ecker, and that was a while ago now. And then the President's Award for Volunteer Service, I was quite active with Editors Canada earlier on when I was freelancing. So I was part of the certification steering committee at the national level, and then at the local level, I worked with the peerless Francis Peck on developing the programs for our monthly meetings at the branch level. And then, most recently is the Karen Virag Award, which is the award for promoting the editorial profession. And it's still an award that I don't think that I deserve. There's so many people that I think should have won it ahead of me, but this is all James's fault, and I blame him entirely.
Yeah, well, that's the one that certainly I find most relatable. And certainly it seems like an obvious choice to me. So, I think what you've done is certainly you're popular in Canada. We have so many Canadians in the room today, and certainly you're popular down here in the United States and around the world. You're world renowned, and we're proud to have you on the show. So thanks so much for being here. I really need to cut it off because it's time. Just a few people in the chat have said, gotta run. But thanks so much for being here. It's been a lot of fun talking to you, and it's really some really interesting stuff about plain language. So,
and thank you for all you're doing to bring us all together during this pandemic. This is the first time I've been able to attend live, but I have caught up on some of the episodes on YouTube, and so it's wonderful that you're bringing so many people together. Thank you to you and to Heather and Aaron.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that. We will be back in 2 weeks. We are doing a third March show because we do it every 2 weeks. So March 30th, we're going to have June Casagrande here, who I've never met in person, has never come to a conference. Another person I know very well from Twitter and from other other places, but never met in person. So that's going to be a lot of fun and exciting. So thanks very much, everybody. See you in a couple of weeks.
Is it okay if I stay on just a couple moments to see what people were chatting about? Because I wasn't following the chat during the...
I suppose. We'll send you the chat, right? We can send her the chat, right, Heather? We'll send you the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I ruin your exit credits?
Totally. That's right. People really like the theme song, so... Okay, thank you. We will send you the chat.
Aw, thank you. Sorry about that. I should have stopped.